The awakening ceremony for the 9th Conscript Regiment happened at dawn, inside a gray stone hall that smelled like chalk and cold metal. One by one, recruits stepped onto the resonance platform and the system read them. A flash of light, a rank badge, a class inscription hovering in the air for everyone to see. Dark Swordsman, Combat Mage, Iron Breaker, Siege Lancer. Each one pulled cheers from the rows of benches. Each one made the instructors nod. Then Kalen Voss stepped onto the platform. The light flickered. The hall went quiet. The inscription appeared, pale and half-formed above his head. Class registered, Undying Medic, Support Non-Combat, Rank. Someone laughed first. Then the whole bench was laughing. Sergeant Bren, a broad-shouldered combat mage with a fresh S-rank badge, turned to the man beside him and said, loud enough for the whole hall to hear, "They're sending us to the escarpment with a field nurse." Commander Aldrich wasn't laughing. He was staring at Kalen with the flat, tired expression of a man doing arithmetic. He called Kalen to his office that afternoon and laid out the options plainly. Register a secondary offensive class, accept a rear post assignment, or face discharge for failing to meet combat readiness standards. The system allowed secondary registrations at a cost. Aldrich slid the form across the desk. Kalen looked at it for a long moment, then he slid it back. "I won't carry a weapon," Kalen said. "I'll go to the front." Aldrich studied him. "Voss, the shattered escarpment has a 91% casualty rate on the first push. You understand what that means for a man who can't fight back?" "I understand," Kalen said. "I still won't carry a weapon." The discharge papers were drawn up that evening. Commander Aldrich signed them, but did not file them. He told himself it was because the regiment was already under strength. He did not examine the thought further. Tovin Mast was the regiment's highest-ranked awakener, an SSS-tier combat sovereign, the kind of class that made battlefield commanders move him to the front of every briefing. He found Kalen in the barracks the night before deployment, sitting on his bunk reading a class ability log that listed exactly 3 skills, none of them offensive. "You're going to get someone killed," Tovin said. Not cruelly, more like a man reading a weather report. "When it gets bad up there, a real soldier will break cover to pull you out. That soldier will die. Your pacifism costs other people, Voss. Think about that." Kalen looked up from the log. His eyes were calm and steady in a way that made Tovin slightly uncomfortable. "I'm going to save everyone I can reach," Kalen said. "That's all I've ever intended." Tovin left without another word. He told Bren afterward that the blank class medic was either the bravest man he'd ever met or the most delusional, and he couldn't decide which was worse. The shattered escarpment was a 200-meter vertical cliff face at the edge of a plateau held by the Veldrith occupation, a fortified enemy position that had repelled 6 assault waves in 8 months. Command needed the plateau. The 9th was the 7th wave. They went up on rope ladders and climbing rigs at first light, and for 11 minutes it looked like it might work. Then the Veldrath opened up from the bunker line above, and the 9th Regiment came apart in real time. Siege Lancers went down. The combat mages tried to return fire, and were picked off one by one from angles they couldn't cover. Tovin Mast fought brilliantly for 40 minutes, his class ability crackling across the plateau in broad arcs, and then took a concussive blast, sent him over the lip of the cliff, barely catching a rope 10 meters down. Sergeant Bren took a hit to the shoulder and stopped moving. Commander Aldrich called the retreat. It was the only call he could make. "Fall back to the base camp. We regroup at 0600. The ropes swung heavy with men climbing down. Kalen did not climb down. He stood at the top of the cliff, at the edge of the plateau, and looked out across the wreckage. The Veldrath had pulled back to their bunkers for the night. The shooting had stopped. In every direction across the torn-up ground there were wounded men, some calling out, some silent, some barely moving. Undying medic, passive, lifeline, counter-current stacks. He moved toward the nearest one. What followed was not heroism in any dramatic sense. It was simply one man walking through an open killing field, over and over in the dark. He had no weapon. He had field dressings, a bone-knit salve, and a class ability that could stabilize a collapsed lung or seal a severed vessel if he pressed his hands to the wound and held them there long. Enough. He carried men who couldn't walk. He dragged men who were too heavy to carry. He memorized the bunker patrol rotations by their light patterns and moved between them in the gaps. Every time the lifeline counter ticked up, he felt something in his chest. Not warmth exactly, more like the sensation of a lock releasing. He did not stop to examine it. There was always another man ahead. Lifeline counter, 1478. He went back down the rope for water and field supplies twice. He did not sleep. At some point in the deep middle of the night, Sergeant Bren, who had recovered enough to sit up, looked over the lip of the cliff from the base camp and saw a white-haired figure moving through the darkness above, unhurried and impossible, pulling another man to the ropes. Bren said nothing for a long time. Then he woke Tovin Mast. They watched together. Neither of them spoke. Lifeline counter, 5178. Commander Aldrich was informed at 0300. He came to the cliff edge and looked up. He watched for 2 hours. He did not order Kalen down. He was not sure he had the authority anymore. Dawn came gray and slow over the plateau. The Veldreth stirred in their bunkers, and Kalen Voss walked to the rope anchor with the last man over his shoulder. A combat mage, who had been listed as confirmed dead in Aldrich's preliminary report, and lowered him down hand over hand. Lifeline counter, 7878. The system was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then the passive triggered. Undying medic, hidden passive unlocked. Absolute lifeline, all stacks converted. Death immunity 60, all stabilized units. Full vitality restored. Class rank revised. Unranked, beyond measurable parameters. Every soldier Kalen had pulled from the plateau that night opened their eyes at once. Men who had been stabilized but unconscious sat up. The combat mage he had just lowered down the rope stood and looked at his own hands, confused. Sergeant Bren grabbed the rope and pulled himself to his feet, without noticing the wound in his shoulder had closed. Kalen stood at the top of the cliff and looked down at the assembled regiment below him. His uniform was torn. His hands were covered in dried field salve and dust. He was not glowing. He was not radiating power. He was just standing there, calm and exhausted, the way he always looked. The base camp was completely silent. Commander Aldrich reached into his jacket, out the discharge papers for Kalen Voss, and tore them in half without reading them again. He folded the halves and put them in the campfire. He looked up at Kalen. "Voss, when you're ready." Tovin Mast had not moved from the cliff edge. He was still looking up. The man who had carried SSS rank combat sovereign like a shield, who had never once felt uncertain on a battlefield, who had told Kalen plainly that his pacifism would cost real soldiers their lives. That man stood at the base of a cliff and did not say anything. A long time. Then he turned to Bren. "He saved you. You know that." Bren nodded. He was looking at the ground. When the order came to attempt the second assault, the regiment lined up at the ropes. Every ranking awakener was present. Tovin at the front, Bren behind him. The combat mage who'd been listed as dead standing in line like the whole night had been a dream. No one moved. They were all looking up. Kalen Voss descended the rope from the plateau, landed lightly at the base, and turned to face the cliff. He had no weapon. He never would. He looked up at the escarpment the way a man looks at a problem he has already decided to solve, and then he began to climb. The entire regiment followed him without a word.